This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. David Schemm, State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, begins today's show as he highlights FSA loan programs and current interest rates. K-State Extension agronomists Tina Sullivan and Logan Simon keep the show rolling as they discuss factors to help grow, cut, and maintain quality hay. Ending the show is part of a Beef Cattle Institute Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and special guest Cambree Schmaltz chatting about the CalfDex project and what they want to provide to producers. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our show discussing Farm Service Agency loan programs with State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. David, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
David, how are loan programs looking right now for the Farm Service Agency?
Well, we've been definitely busy this year trying to make sure that we're helping those producers and getting them the financial assistance that they need out there, whether or not it's a operating loan or a farm ownership, a land purchase, various things like that. Have a lot of options there for producers to be able to work with, including beginning farmers. Currently, Kansas has a very good sized portfolio. When we talk about our loan program, we have over 5,500 producers and over $1.3 billion in total loans out there. And that's a combination of both our direct loans and our guaranteed loans. And so for those people unfamiliar, Shelby, direct loans are loans that FSA ourselves that we make directly to the borrowers, those producers out there. And our guaranteed loan program is we work with commercial lenders, the banks out there, and they make the loan to the producers, but we guarantee those loans for those banks so that they can make those loans to the producers and give them a good interest rate right now there. We have a obviously challenging times right now for a lot of our producers out there when we're talking about input prices and the cost of everything. And, that's something that very much the president and the secretary are very much attuned with. And I know as well, Deputy Secretary Vaden with the cost of fertilizer, definitely wanting to look into that, making sure that our producers are getting fair prices for their fertilizer. But those input costs, again, not just fertilizer, but it's seed, equipment, repairs, fuel. We know it all is something that obviously the president and the secretary are very much attuned with, but that impacts that farmer's bottom line. And commodity prices, they've been all over the board. Generally, they're not really great for our row crop guys right now. So those farmers right now that, that are facing the financial stress, just one thing I want them to know out there is FSA can refinance all farm debt, excluding real estate for anybody out there. And that is up to $400,000 that we can do. And the current interest rate is 4.75% on that. So, again, a very competitive interest rate for those producers out there in that. And that debt can be structured anywhere from 7 years clear up to 21 years on that refinancing, depending upon cash flow needs for those producers there. And again, real estate purchases, construction loans are also available up to $600,000 across several different programs out there. That's one of the neat thing. And it's just, I think we all know the importance of that next generation, that beginning farmer program. But that interest rates there is a very low interest rates, which makes it very, very helpful to those producers. That's 1.75% there. And joint finance is 3.75%. And the 100% FSA financing option is 5.75%. percent interest. And those terms there for those beginning farmers are up to 40 years, Shelby. So again, structured to help give that beginning farmer that opportunity to make a go of it and to be successful in their operation. One thing I've got to note, because I've had some neat interactions with people, because I guess I'm getting closer to that point of being older, no longer young. But when we say beginning farmer, definitely I'm not talking about age. What we look at when we're talking about beginning farmer is somebody that has been actively engaged in farming for 10 years or less. So had the opportunity to talk to one, and I will use it somewhat loosely, young producer out there who was 47 years of age and had just come back to the family farm about 3 years prior. And I said, absolutely, you're a beginning farmer. So come see us. There's a lot of ways we can help those people out there as well.
David, when you look at the loan portfolio for the Farm Service Agency, are you able to see how it ebbs and flows through the agriculture farm cycle? Are there differences?
No, absolutely. And Shelby, I'm glad you asked. That's a great question because it's the aspect too, is that, on our operating loan side of things there for our producers there, it's not just a ebb and flow cycle with the financial possibly strains or situations that producer can find in, but I'd almost say it's regional in a lot of ways there because there's areas of the state that may have experienced some type of disaster, everything from flooding, which I know recently we've had some areas that I had heard reports of 8 to 9 inches of rain here over the weekend, which I think any producer out there, even on the western side, would say that 9 inches of rain in one setting is not good. It does a lot of damage out there. But also drought. So a lot of times, when we get into those disasters that affect producers there, if they're affected by drought or maybe hailstorms, and sometimes it could be even consecutive years that they experience that can put a financial strain on the operation. Maybe there's a caveat. We all know that whenever that younger generation or next generation comes back to the farm, it can create an additional stress, financial stress on an operation there. So definitely that's kind of some of the cycles. And absolutely, yes, to your point that just the general flow, times when commodity prices, and right now it's great that our livestock, especially our cow-calf portion of the industry, is seeing these high prices, able to recoup and help to rebuild their operations and build their operations there. But they have faced cycles. Our row crop guys face cycle. All of our producers across the state, specialty crop, they all face cycles there that we see the interest comes in there when they're in those cycles. So definitely a key component. And that's why I always like to definitely emphasize there, we have components, and that's why producers always come in and talk to us, whether or not it's just for an operating loan or possibly some land purchase, but also construction. We also have farm storage facility loan that can cover a wide breadth for those producers. Many times, many of our producers think of grain bins, but it's also for our specialty crop producers. Maybe they need cold storage to store apples or citrus or vegetables there, bees, and it can also even get into equipment when we talk about farm storage facility loans that can encompass everything from a grain trailer to a grain cart to a skid steer. They're all considered handling devices out there. So great program. All producers qualify for that farm storage facility loan. And again, those financially stressed borrowers definitely are ones that we're here to help. And then obviously those beginning farmers.
Are there some upcoming deadlines for programs through the Farm Service Agency?
Absolutely, there are. I think many of our producers, with the data that I have seen, most of our producers have gotten signed up and should have gotten payments. If a payment have not gone through here, definitely reach out. Or if you haven't signed up yet, definitely reach out to that county office. But Farmer Bridge Assistance Program out there, we've been working on that hard and fast. That deadline's coming up here on April the 17th. So definitely make sure if you haven't already signed up for it, get in there and talk to the county office and get signed up for it there. And if you haven't already signed up for it and you're dealing with an issue and haven't received the payment yet, definitely reach out to the county office as well on that. But then also the Supplemental Disaster Relief Program, that deadline's coming up here at the end of April there. We've had stage 1 that's been already gone out. Stage 2 is currently with what we're working with, and that's a little bit more addressing both shallow losses and quality losses there. So any questions on that, get out there to the local county office and talk with them.
And David, while we're thinking about talking with our county offices, What issues or concerns or maybe good things could producers go in and be chatting with them this time of year?
Well, absolutely. We're getting busy into that planting season, and it's coming up here real soon here. So, definitely we will have some acreage reporting here coming up as we go on down here. Still a few months away here as we're looking at planting season. Just always encourage those producers there. Keep those notes there. Keep track of those planting dates you're doing for those fields and the crops that you're going to be reporting on there to be able to get in there to the county offices and talk with them on that. We're working with the base acre allocation program there for producers to make sure that's streamlined and easy. There will be more information coming out in the coming months on that. So producers that are wondering on those base allocations as designed around that One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we're working hard and fast on that to get that out there too as well there. So a lot of components that we're working on right now here for those producers there, ARC and PLC, all those components we're working on there at the county office there. But probably the biggest exciting thing for that we've got going on right now, Shelby, is that recently the national office reached out to us, and FSA is being able to hire again, both internally and externally. So we've got to have some positions coming open there. So I would definitely encourage those people. Some of our offices will be able to hire on a few people, but we got some programs both in farm loan trainee positions as well as county executive director trainee positions there that people can take a look at. That will get posted up onto usajobs.gov, place for them to look. But definitely excited to be able to announce that as we start to be able to hire people back into some critical need staffing there. Again, Shelby, we can always definitely use more staff, but we're sure thankful that we do get to hire some of these people on and get them out here, be a part of our great team.
David, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was State Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Service Agency, David Schemm. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing hay quality with two K-State Extension agronomists, Tina Sullivan and Logan Simon. Tina, Logan, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us, Shelby.
Yes, thank you.
Tina, while we're thinking about hay quality, what are some factors for growers to keep in mind?
When we think about what all goes into hay quality, some factors we can actually affect, some others we cannot. Kind of the ones we do affect would be our cutting time, our cutting height, because cutting height does affect our hay quality at the end of the day. Our fertility management, so when and how much fertility products or manure applications are going across that field. But the things we cannot control would be the weather, of course, how hot it's been, how cool it's been, if we get a cold event, or if it continues to rain, or the lack of rain. So what can we affect? What can't we affect? And some of those pieces even go into once the hay is cut, we cannot control if hay gets rained on. And when hay does get rained on, we do lose hay quality.
So for this time of year, what should growers be keeping in mind or figuring out?
Yeah, so since we are into April, a lot of our fertility products should have already gone out, especially if we consider fertility prices. We should not be applying anything right now because, one, it's not cost effective, and two, we're not going to see that return on investment in the amount of forage produced typically at this stage, whether it is one of our one-time cuts like a cool season forage like brome, or those multi-cuts in the season such as alfalfa. It really needs to be that fertility all in the upfront as much as we can to affect the later cuts. So with fertility out of mind now, next piece is we kind of see our fields greening up, the forage actively growing, especially as a lot of portions of the state has gotten rain. In the east, we know some of the southwest hasn't gotten much. It should be actively growing, and with how warm it's been, plus these pockets of rain, our forage actually may be popping up, greening up, and actually maturing faster than we thought previously in other years.
What would that mean then for that plant or forage?
So that's a really good point, talking about advanced maturity. So what we do really need to be mindful of as we turn really warm and we move things up, what we could cause is this crop to transition into reproductive stages, getting into boot and heading stages earlier. And it's at that point that we do see overall forage quality decline as the plant transitions its allocation of resources from the production of leaf and stem material into the production of the head and the subsequent seed. So if we think that we are on a more advanced schedule than in typical years, we need to be getting out and really monitoring those fields for maturity and potentially cutting at a time when maybe we don't have as much height on it as we might have expected if this heat is forcing us to transition to reproductive stages earlier. So really monitor that, as we do know once we get into heading stages, forage quality does significantly decline.
And it doesn't just apply to our grasses, it also applies to our legumes. So alfalfa and clover, the more buds or flowers we see out there, the further along that production is getting, and we are losing forage quality in those stands as well, especially when you think about alfalfa and us. We want it to be as high quality as possible, but if we're moving through those, early bloom to bigger blooms, kind of that's how alfalfa works, we are reducing that forage quality. And kind of thinking about our forages once they're cut, we need to think a little bit about when we are raking or heading the hay, so pulling it up into piles before the baling. We don't want to ted or rake the hay when it's too dry, and hot days, windy days can drive that drying process pretty quickly, because if those forages get too dry and we ted them or move them a lot with metal tines, we're breaking up that material. If we're losing leaf material compared to stem material, we're losing that forage quality and increasing our indigestible fiber. So kind of staying on top of how dry that crop is and tedding it into piles in condition with when we're going to bale it. So many pieces in the baling process.
Yeah, that's a really important point, focusing on where is the protein in the plant, and especially when we think about legumes, that's largely in those leaves. So our clovers, our alfalfas, we really need to be mindful, because those leaves, when they're very dry, become brittle and very easily can be knocked off and lost from your overall product. And then what you're getting is basically a forage that is made up of more stem material, a higher concentration of stem material. And those stems then have a higher concentration of indigestible fibers like lignin. And that also ties back to that conversation on maturity. What we're seeing happen as we move into maturity is we see that plant developing more of those structural carbohydrates, as we call them, and largely that's lignin. And lignin is the opposite of what we want. More lignin is going to drop the concentration of the other digestible nutrients in that hay product, and so that's why timing and handling is so important, because it's all about the concentration and ratios of these key nutritional factors, protein and fiber, and especially that lignin.
And kind of think about wrapping it up, right? The way we store our hay bales is going to affect the overall longevity of those proteins, those fibers, those structures, and that forage quality over time. If we're wrapping it with a plastic film of some sort, silage wrap of some like product, or if we're storing it in a barn compared to outdoors in a pot stacked pile, the water, environment, heat, coolness, all this affects the longevity of the quality of that hay as well. So not here to sell bale wrap, but just kind of keeping it in mind that the way we are storing our hay also affects the longevity of those proteins, the fiber, all those things that the livestock need. It's the reason why we are baling the forage at the end of the day, is to feed livestock. And we hope to actually have an e-update soon on quality factors to be considered in forage production.
And backtracking just a little bit from storing the hay or raking the hay, are there considerations when it comes to swathing the hay?
So when we're swathing the hay, we do want to be mindful of the time we are cutting that forage, kind of a piece detail that sometimes gets lost because it's seen more as a technique. Maybe it's also still a science as well. but thinking about how those plants are moving nutrients within themselves, how they're transpiring, all that fun portion of it. Plants are moving sugars at different times of the day. So we should probably be focusing in especially our high humid environments. Our cutting time needs to be typically in that mid to late morning once the dew has dried off. It's going to help with the quickness of the hay drying out, and also make sure all the nutrients and fun structural stuff going on inside the plants are where it needs to be to get kind of that peak nutrition. We think about in fruits and vegetables, we always talk about they're picked at a certain time of the day for max nutrition. We need to think about that in the same way as our forages, for we get max nutrition for our cattle and calves and sheep and goats and horses.
And tied in with our swathing and then ultimately baling, we're talking about moisture here. An important consideration we must ensure is that we are putting this hay up at the proper moisture. So when we're looking at putting this hay up, we want to be somewhere in that 15 to 18% moisture before we put that in the bale. That's going to help us keep from the development of mold growth and also heating concerns. That's real. That is a real and present concern. When we do have excessively wet hay, we get microbial growth that produces heat. And honestly, everybody's probably had an experience or a neighbor who's had this experience. Worst case scenario for high moisture hay in a bale is spontaneous combustion. It's crazy. So absolutely essential that we're handling these forages properly. And I think that dealing with some of these issues, I've seen some folks over in further east where drying is a challenge. This could be a reason to consider wet wrapping, as we are able to wrap that forage in plastic and treat it more as a semi-silage type product. And instead of having that heating concern, we actually get more fermentation in that bale like a silage product. I have seen that be a consideration for why people wet wrap.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And can justify the expense and time to wet wrap.
Mm-hmm.
Tina, Logan, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Shelby.
Those were K-State Extension agronomists Logan Simon and Tina Sullivan. If you'd like to read more on this topic, I will link the Agronomy eUpdate article titled Considerations to Improve Hay Quality in today's show notes on agtoday.net. As Tina mentioned, you can also keep up to date with other things coming out from K-State's Department of Agronomy by following the eUpdates. You can find them by going to eUpdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Bob Larson, and their special guest, Cambree Schmaltz.
So you've worked on a project that's called CalfDex, and that project allows, and it was really driven by questions from producers about how can we better transfer data between segments of the industry. And it's evolved to now, how do we have better records in each segment of the industry so we can better understand production goals, economic goals, some of the other things that we're targeting. Give me your overview of what this project has entailed and how you got involved.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. It really just started as a way, how do we record our data and make sure we're actually using it for management decisions. There's so many people that are great about, they have their calving record books and they write all the records throughout the year, but then they throw the book away and they never look at it again. Or maybe it's in a drawer somewhere and maybe they look at it once a year, but it's really not driving their management decisions. So how can we convert that information that we're doing a great job recording and make sure it's something that they can use to influence their management decisions, their culling decisions, whatever that may be, to drive their production forward in the cow-calf sector. And then we have those records collected and they can go downstream to benefit the next producer.
Bob, as we've talked about record systems in the past, they can become very complex and intricate to enter some of those record forms. What have you done in this project? Because you and Dr. Schroeder from Ag Econ have kind of headed up this project. What have you done to alleviate some of those challenges with, I don't have time to enter 900 records?
And it's been a good project because, I'm coming at it kind of from the veterinary practitioner standpoint, helping my clients collect records. Dr. Schroeder and Cambree kind of came from it from the Ag Econ perspective. What kind of ratios, what kind of numbers do we want to be able to look at? And throughout this entire project, we knew we would have to make some compromises. The more information I want, the more information I have to gather, and the more complicated that is, and the less likely it's going to happen. So we've had multiple conversations really trying to figure out the true target audience and recognizing that we can't provide a product that absolutely fits everybody's needs. So we focused on a few things. We focused on commercial producers. So we weren't really trying to provide the answers that a purebred person may want, purebred producer. We were interested in commercial producers who were interested in passing that information on to their buyers. And so those became kind of some of the things that we had some surveys where we surveyed cow-calf producers and had them kind of rank which were the most important pieces of information that they wanted to make decisions on. And then we also asked some feedlot producers, what is the most important information that you want to get from your suppliers? We tried to keep it as simple as we could and still gather the information that we wanted. So in some ways, so we will have people using our product, the record-keeping system, that want more, and we've kind of decided not to add any more at this point. Although we have, and I'll turn back to Cambree, had a recent upgrade to the system, which I think is really handy. And that in the past, basically, it was you used your phone or a tablet or something like that to collect the information. But we recently added an online dashboard, which I think adds a lot of functionality. And Cambree was really the one behind that and making sure that happened well.
Yeah, so we just hearing from producers and their concerns, it's very clunky and it's not convenient to enter all your records. Those 900 records typing on one at a time on your phone is not, nobody wanted to do it, and I think that was enough for them to give up and go try something else. So we just made an option for them to go on CalfDex.com. They can the same login as they would use on the app and have the same features and then some. They have the ability to move their cattle between herds because we understand that they don't necessarily stay in the same group their whole life. They can enter 50 females at a time in a big batch, and they can do it within 10 seconds, move on to the next group. And we've just made it a lot more convenient and accessible for them by being able to have that web platform. And I think Bob did a great job detailing that we've been very intentional about what we allow them to record and trying to not make it happen so that they have an overwhelming amount of data that they just end up not using. We want to make sure this is accessible, beneficial data that's going to drive their operation.
Once again, that was part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast. You can find the full episode by following the link in today's show notes on agtoday.net. That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.